you lie down ready to rest, and your body stays switched on. There is a hormone behind that wired feeling, and it moves like a daily tide, one that, as night falls, has already begun to turn. The part that quietly changes the evening. You don't have to switch it off. As the hours pass, it lowers on its own. Welcome to sleepy science. Tonight follows that gentle tide downward, toward its lowest point in the deep middle of the night, long before it climbs again to meet the morning. Let the day's pressure loosen from your shoulders and your jaw, the way a held tide finally slackens. Nothing to push against now. Nothing left for you to carry. So let's follow that quiet turning, beginning with where the tide stands the moment your head first touches the pillow. Underneath everything we'll explore tonight rests one quiet question. How does your body's stress hormone learn to soften as darkness gathers? The hormone is cortisol, and though it wears the name of stress, it behaves more like a gentle inner sunrise, the chemistry that helps you wake, focus, and rise to meet each morning. It moves through your bloodstream in a slow daily tide, high when the day asks you to be present, low when the world asks nothing of you. Tonight we won't hurry toward the answer. We'll simply follow that tide as it falls, hour by hour, and let the question stay open a little while, the way a window stays open to cool night air. Cortisol is a hormone, one of the body's chemical messengers. And more precisely, it belongs to a family called glucocorticoids. Your body builds it from cholesterol, the same soft, waxy substance often spoken of only in warnings. Yet here, it becomes the raw material for something the body cannot do without. Through a patient sequence of steps, cholesterol is reshaped, molecule by molecule, into the steroid we call cortisol. Because it is fat-based, it slips easily through the outer walls of your cells, reaching places water-based messengers cannot. Understanding this quiet origin helps the rest of the story make sense. Cortisol is not an intruder, but something your own chemistry carefully assembles, over and over, every single day. Cortisol is made in two small glands that sit like soft caps atop your kidneys, one on each side, tucked deep within your lower back. These are the adrenal glands, and each weighs only about 1/6 of an ounce, smaller than a grape, yet steady in their work. Their outer layer, the adrenal cortex, holds the specialized cells that assemble cortisol. Within that cortex lies a middle band, the zona fasciculata, where most of your cortisol is quietly produced. It is a gentle thought, perhaps, that something shaping your whole day comes from glands so small you would never feel them. They ask for no attention, and give without pause, through waking and through sleep alike. Cortisol is often called the stress hormone, and the name is not wrong, only incomplete. Yes, when something demands your energy, cortisol rises to help you meet it. But that same rise happens every single morning, gently, before any trouble appears. simply to help you leave sleep behind and step into the day. In this light, cortisol looks less like an alarm and more like a daily activator. The chemistry of readiness, of focus, of rising. It stirs your metabolism, sharpens your attention, and prepares your body to move. To think of it only as stress is to see just one small corner of a hormone that, most of all, helps you begin again each dawn. Cortisol is not made on a whim. It follows a chain of quiet signals that begins deep in the brain. At the top sits a small region called the hypothalamus, no larger than an almond. It acts as a kind of overseer for many of the body's rhythms. When the moment calls for cortisol, the hypothalamus releases a messenger of its own, a substance that travels only a short distance to the next station along the path. This is the first link in what scientists call the HPA axis, a graceful relay running from brain to gland. Tonight, following that relay, we'll see how a whisper in the brain becomes a tide of chemistry reaching every corner of the body. The hypothalamus does not act alone. Just beneath it hangs the pituitary gland, a small structure about the size of a pea, often called the body's master gland for the many signals it sends. When the hypothalamus whispers, the pituitary listens, and in turn releases its own messenger into the bloodstream, the substance known as ACTH, or adrenocorticotropic hormone. This traveler has a single destination in mind. It journeys down through the body toward the adrenal glands, carrying instructions written in chemistry rather than words. The pituitary is the middle voice in the relay, translating a brief signal from above into a clear command below. Each handoff is gentle, precise, and repeated faithfully throughout your day and night. When ACTH reaches the adrenal glands, it lands like a key finding its lock. The cells of the adrenal cortex recognize the signal and begin their work, drawing on stored cholesterol to assemble fresh cortisol within minutes. Soon, cortisol slips out of the glands and into the bloodstream, carried on the current of your circulation toward tissues near and far. This is the third and final link of the HPA axis. Hypothalamus to pituitary to adrenal. A message that began as a whisper in the brain, now answered by a rising tide of hormone. It is a beautifully unhurried system. Each step waits for the one before, and yet it greets each morning right on time. What rises will also learn when to settle, and cortisol carries its own quiet break. As its levels climb in the blood, cortisol travels back toward the brain and speaks to the very regions that summoned it, the hypothalamus and the pituitary. There, it gently signals them to ease their messages, slowing the release of the substances that call for more. Scientists call this negative feedback, the product of a system telling that system it has had enough. It is a little like a thermostat, sensing warmth and softening the flame. Because of this loop, cortisol rarely runs unchecked. The same tide that rises to wake you carries within it the instructions for its own return to stillness. One of cortisol's oldest and most faithful tasks is tending your body's supply of energy. Through the night and into the morning, It gently encourages the liver to release stored sugar into the blood, and even to craft new glucose from other building blocks. In doing so, cortisol helps keep your blood sugar steady during the long hours you go without eating, so your brain and muscles are never left wanting. Measured in the familiar units of milligrams per deciliter, this quiet balancing keeps your fuel within a safe and even range. It is one reason you can sleep for 8 hours and still wake with the energy to rise. Cortisol has been keeping the fire softly fed all along. Cortisol also lends a steadying hand to your blood pressure, the gentle force that carries blood through every vessel. It helps your blood vessels respond properly to other signals, including adrenaline, so that their walls hold just the right amount of tone, neither too slack nor too tight. Without enough cortisol, blood pressure can drift lower than the body would like, leaving a person feeling faint or weary upon standing. With it, the circulation stays poised and even, ready to deliver oxygen wherever it is needed. This is cortisol working far from the spotlight, in the quiet mechanics of pressure and flow, keeping the body's rivers moving smoothly, whether you are rising from bed or resting in the dark. Cortisol has a subtle relationship with your immune system, the body's watchful network of defense. In careful amounts, it acts as a kind of moderator, calming inflammation and keeping the immune response from growing louder than the moment requires. This is why medicines modeled on cortisol are often used to soothe swelling and quiet an overactive defense. Within the body's own rhythm, cortisol's morning rise gently tunes immune activity for the day, while its nightly fall allows other repair processes to take their turn. It does not switch the immune system on or off so much as adjust its volume, hour by hour. In this way, cortisol helps the body defend itself without ever letting that defense turn against its own tissues. Perhaps cortisol's most familiar gift is the clarity it brings to your morning mind. As its levels climb in the hours around waking, cortisol helps sharpen alertness, lift the fog of sleep, and bring the world back into focus. It touches regions of the brain involved in attention and memory, gently priming them for the day ahead. This is why the first hour after waking often feels like the mind slowly coming online, thoughts gathering themselves into order. Far from being a burden, this morning rise is a kindness, the chemistry that lets you open your eyes and feel ready, or nearly ready, to begin. Tonight, of course, we are traveling the opposite way, watching that same clarity soften back toward rest. Not all of the cortisol in your blood is free to act at any given moment. Most of it travels bound to a carrier, a protein sometimes called cortisol-binding globulin, which holds the hormone gently as it moves through the bloodstream. Only a small fraction floats freely, and it is this free portion that can slip into cells and do its work. The bound cortisol waits in reserve, released as needed. It is like a quiet supply held just out of reach until the moment calls. This arrangement smooths the hormone's effects, softening sharp peaks and steadying its reach. It is one more example of the body's patience, keeping much of its cortisol in waiting, so that what acts does so gently and in measure Cortisol works in a way that is unhurried by nature. Because it is fat-based, it passes through a cell's outer membrane and journeys inward, where it meets a waiting partner called a receptor. Together, they travel to the cell's core, to the DNA itself, and their cortisol helps decide which genes are read and which stay quiet. In this way, it shapes the very proteins a cell will make. This is a slow kind of influence, unfolding over minutes and hours rather than instants, which is fitting for a hormone that governs the long arc of a day. Cortisol does not shout a quick command. It gently rewrites the instructions a cell follows, guiding the body's chemistry from within. One reason cortisol touches so much of your life is that its receptors are found almost everywhere. Nearly every cell in your body carries the ability to listen for cortisol. In the liver and muscles, the immune cells, the blood vessels, and deep within the brain. This wide reach is why a single hormone can steady your blood sugar, adjust your immune response, and shape your mood and focus all at once. Cortisol is less a specialist than a conductor. Its influence felt across the whole orchestra of the body. And because so many cells are tuned to its rhythm, the daily rise and fall of cortisol becomes a kind of shared signal, gently telling the entire body what hour it is. It would be easy, hearing the word stress so often, to imagine cortisol as something the body would be better without. Yet the truth is gentler and more interesting. Cortisol is not a flaw or an intruder. It is a hormone you cannot live well without. People whose bodies cannot make enough of it become weary, faint, and unwell. The trouble that people sometimes have does not come from cortisol existing. It comes from its rhythm being disturbed, from the tide rising or falling at the wrong hours. Holding this idea softly is the heart of tonight's story. Cortisol itself is not the difficulty. The music matters less than whether it is played in time. Scientists can measure cortisol in several ways, each offering its own quiet window. It can be read from a small sample of blood, from saliva gathered gently at the cheek, or from urine collected across a whole day. In the blood, cortisol is often described in units of micrograms per deciliter. In the early morning, a healthy level might sit somewhere around 10 to 20 micrograms per deciliter, reflecting the hormone's daily peak. By the deep of night, that same measure often falls well below 5. These numbers are not meant to be memorized, only felt as a shape, a curve that rises and falls. They are how researchers first began to trace the very tide we are following tonight. When scientists gathered enough of these measurements, a clear and beautiful pattern emerged. Cortisol does not hold steady through the day. It rises and falls in a daily rhythm, as regular as the turning of the earth. Its highest levels arrive in the morning, in the hours around waking, and its lowest come near the middle of the night, when sleep runs deepest. Between those two poles, the hormone drifts slowly downward across the afternoon and evening. This daily shape is one of the most dependable rhythms in all of human biology, seen in person after person. It is the tide at the center of tonight's journey, and the nightly fall, that gentle descent toward the small hours is the quiet mystery we've come to follow. There is a small, remarkable feature tucked into cortisol's morning rise. Within the first 30 to 45 minutes after you wake, cortisol climbs sharply, reaching a brief peak higher than the level at which you woke. Scientists call this the cortisol awakening response, and it appears in most healthy people, day after day. It seems to be the body's way of gathering itself for the hours ahead, a gentle surge of readiness that fades once its work is done. You may have felt its effect without ever naming it. That slow gathering of alertness in the first part of the morning. It is the peak of the tide, the highest water before the long, unhurried fall that carries us toward night. After that morning peak, cortisol begins a long and gentle decline that lasts the whole day through. The fall is not a smooth straight line, but a wavering descent, dipping and rising in small pulses along the way. This is because the adrenal glands release cortisol in soft bursts rather than a steady stream, each burst a little smaller as the day goes on. If you could watch the level hour by hour, you would see a downward slope textured with tiny hills and valleys, trending ever lower toward evening. It is a fitting rhythm for a hormone of readiness, strongest when the day begins, softening as the hours pass, quietly making room for the rest that waits at the far end. By the time the evening deepens, cortisol has drifted low, and its slow fall carries it toward the quietest point of all. Something in this descent begins to shift the question we opened tonight. We asked how the stress hormone winds down as night falls. And here we can begin to feel that the winding down is not something the body forces, but something it allows. A tide obeying a rhythm older than any single day. The lowest water is still ahead of us, near the middle of the night. What guides the hormone so faithfully to that low point, hour after hour, is a thread we have not yet followed, and it is where the rest of the story gently leads. This daily rise and fall is not merely the body reacting to the world outside. If it were, cortisol would rise only when something demanded it and rest whenever life was calm. Instead, the rhythm is generated from within, written into the body's own timekeeping. Scientists discovered this by studying people kept away from clocks and sunlight, in quiet rooms with no cue to the hour. Even there, cortisol kept its faithful daily shape, rising toward a subjective morning and falling toward a subjective night. This inner origin is why the rhythm is called circadian, from Latin words meaning about a day. The tide we are following, in other words, flows from a clock the body carries quietly inside itself. That inner clock has a home, a tiny cluster of cells deep in the hypothalamus known as the suprachiasmatic nucleus. Though it holds only a small number of cells, this cluster acts as the body's master timekeeper, setting the pace for many daily rhythms, cortisol among them. It gathers cues from light entering the eyes and uses them to keep its timing aligned with the world outside. Then, through a chain of gentle signals, it shapes when the adrenal glands release their hormone, nudging cortisol upward toward morning and letting it fall toward night. in a sense. This small conductor keeps the whole orchestra in time, ensuring that the tide of cortisol rises and falls in step with the turning day. What makes this inner clock so remarkable is that it keeps running even without the world to guide it. Left in constant dim light, with no sunrise and no sunset, the clock does not simply stop, it continues to mark out its own near-daily rhythm, holding cortisol's rise and fall close to their usual shape. This is what scientists mean when they call the rhythm endogenous, arising from within rather than borrowed from outside. The cues of light and dark do not create the rhythm, they gently keep it aligned, like a hand nudging a pendulum already swinging. It is a comforting thought, perhaps, that the tide carrying you toward rest each night flows from something steady and faithful, held quietly within your own body. So the picture that older understanding gave us is this: a hormone made in small glands atop the kidneys, called forth by a graceful relay from the brain, rising each morning to ready us, and falling each evening toward its lowest point near the middle of the night. All of it guided by a small clock ticking within. Yet knowing the shape of the tide is not the same as knowing how the water actually falls. What happens, hour by hour, in the body as cortisol lets go of the day? What softens it? And what does that softening make possible, that gentler? Closer question is where the next stretch of our night begins to lead. You've been with us for a while now, and your breathing has likely softened without you noticing. A soft subscribe helps another sleepless mind find this sanctuary too. Now, let's pause together, one sleepy soul at a time. Let your attention settle, soft as dust coming to rest on a windowsill. The small clock we just spoke of, tucked deep within the brain, is keeping its quiet time inside you at this very moment, marking the hour, whether you follow it or not. And if it is evening where you are, the tide of cortisol is already low, already easing, already carrying you toward its gentlest point in the hours ahead. You do not have to guide it. The winding down is not a task set before you. It is a current you are already floating upon. Let one more breath go, slow and unhurried, and feel the day's brightness drawing back like a tide leaving the shore. Deep within the brain, tucked just above where the optic nerves cross, sits a tiny cluster of cells called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. It is smaller than a grain of rice, yet it keeps time for your entire body. Scientists call it the master clock. From this quiet corner of the hypothalamus, it sends out a steady rhythm that shapes when you feel alert and when you begin to soften toward sleep. Cortisol, the hormone we have been following tonight, answers to this clock. Its daily rise and fall is not random. It is conducted, gently, by these few thousand cells working in the dark. This master clock does not run entirely on its own. Each morning, light enters your eyes and travels along a direct path to the suprachiasmatic nucleus, telling it that day has arrived. That simple signal keeps the clock aligned with the turning of the earth. Without it, the clock would drift slightly, running a little long each day. Light is how your body learns what time it truly is. And because cortisol follows this clock, the light you meet in the morning quietly helps set the shape of your hormone's curve. Its climb, its long plateau, and the slow descent that carries you toward night. From its place above the crossing nerves, the suprachiasmatic nucleus draws a curve that repeats every single day. It nudges cortisol upward in the hours before dawn, holds it high through the morning, then lets it ease down across the afternoon and into the evening. This is the daily shape your body knows by heart. You do not have to think about it or manage it. The clock has been rehearsing this rhythm since long before you were born. Tonight, as the hours grow late, that same curve is bending downward inside you, following instructions written in a language older than memory. The clock does not touch cortisol directly. Instead, it works through a chain of gentle signals known as the HPA axis. The hypothalamus speaks to the pituitary gland, which speaks to the adrenal glands resting atop your kidneys. And only then is cortisol released. It is a soft cascade, each messenger passing word quietly to the next. When the master clock lowers its signal in the evening, that whole chain begins to relax. The hypothalamus asks for less. The pituitary sends less. And the adrenals answer with less. Step by step, the message to make cortisol grows fainter as the night settles in around you. As the day draws to a close, the drive along this axis naturally softens. The clock, reading the fading light and the lateness of the hour, calls for less and less cortisol. There is nothing for you to do to make this happen. The signal simply eases, the way a hand slowly loosens its hold. Hour by hour through the evening, the push that kept cortisol high during the day quietly withdraws. Your adrenal glands, no longer urged onward, grow still. This easing is the beginning of the long descent, the gentle slope that will carry your stress hormone down toward its lowest point of all. Left to follow its clock, cortisol keeps drifting downward through the late evening until it reaches its lowest point, usually somewhere near midnight. This is the trough, the quietest stretch of the entire daily curve. Notice that you did not lower it by trying. The descent we have been tracing is drawn by the clock itself, not by effort or willpower. Your only part is to stop standing in its way. As the trough draws near, the body grows calm from the inside, cortisol thinning to its faintest presence. How your stress hormone winds down begins to answer itself. It winds down because it is timed too. This midnight trough is not an empty pause. It is what allows your deepest sleep to unfold. When cortisol sits at its lowest, the body is free to sink into slow wave sleep, the heavy, restorative stage where tissues repair and the mind files away the day. Higher cortisol would hold you nearer the surface, more easily stirred. Its retreat clears the way down. So the low point you reach around the middle of the night is not merely rest for the hormone itself. It is a doorway. As cortisol grows faint, the door to deep sleep opens a little wider, and you drift further through it. As cortisol slips toward its trough, another hormone quietly steps forward. Melatonin, made in the small pineal gland, begins to rise in the evening as darkness settles. Where cortisol has spent the day encouraging wakefulness, melatonin gently signals that night has come. The two move in opposite directions across the same hours. One descending, one climbing. This is no accident of timing. Both answer to the same master clock, arranged so that as one loosens its hold on you, the other takes up the work of easing you towards sleep. Tonight, that rising tide of melatonin is already meeting cortisol's long, unhurried retreat. You can picture cortisol and melatonin as two figures trading places at dusk. As the light fades, cortisol steps back, its influence thinning through the evening. At the same time, melatonin steps forward, deepening with the dark. Neither one struggles against the other. They simply take turns, handing the night from one to the next like a shift changing at the close of day. This quiet exchange has been happening in you every evening of your life, mostly unnoticed. Right now, in these very hours, the handover is underway. Cortisol softening, melatonin gathering, carrying your body gently from the day's alertness toward the night's deep rest. Cortisol is not poured out in a smooth, unbroken stream. Instead, the adrenal glands release it in small pulses, gentle bursts spaced across the hours. Think of it less as a steadily running tap and more as a slow, rhythmic tide, rising and falling in soft waves. Each pulse lifts the level a little, and between pulses, it drifts back down. This pulsing pattern runs beneath the larger daily curve, like small ripples riding on a wide, slow swell. Even as the overall tide of cortisol sinks toward its midnight low, these quiet pulses continue, growing smaller and gentler as the night deepens around you. In the evening, these pulses of cortisol grow fewer and fainter. Through the busy hours of the day, the bursts come more often and reach higher. But as night arrives and the master clock calls for less, the pulses soften and spread apart. The gaps between them lengthen. The peaks flatten. It is as though the body is slowing its own quiet drumbeat, letting each pulse fade a little more than the one before. This gradual softening is part of why the descent feels so smooth. There is no sudden drop, only a steady gentling, pulse by pulse, wave by wave, cortisol settling lower into the calm of night. Follow the curve forward, past the midnight low, and something remarkable waits near morning. In the first 30 to 45 minutes after you wake, cortisol does not merely rise, it surges. Scientists call this the cortisol awakening response. It is a brief, gentle climb layered on top of the natural morning increase, a small lift that helps carry you up and into the coming day. Even before you are fully alert, your body is quietly preparing you to meet what lies ahead. This surge is one of the most dependable rhythms in all of human biology. A soft sunrise of its own, arriving with your first waking moments. This morning surge has a purpose. That brief rise of cortisol after waking helps mobilize energy, gathers your attention, and readies the body to move from stillness into the day. It is why the first minutes of morning can feel like slowly coming into focus. The size of this surge can shift with your sleep, your rhythm, and the demands you expect to meet. But its shape stays dependable. A gentle lift, then a settling, as the day's long curve takes over once more. For now, that morning is still far away. You are on the other side of the clock entirely, held in the deepening quiet where cortisol is meant to be low. The curve has carried us a long way down. The busy pulses of the day now spread thin and far apart, cortisol thinning toward its quiet floor. You may notice your own breathing has lengthened, following that same descent without being asked. Nothing here needs anything from you. Let one slow breath leave, and the two of us keep drifting further along the falling curve, toward the night's lowest and calmest hour. Sometimes the curve does not fall the way it should. When bright light fills your evening, screens held close, lamps burning like midday, the master clock can misread the hour and keep cortisol higher than the night calls for. The body stays braced for a day that is already over. This is the familiar feeling of being tired yet unable to settle. The mind longs for rest, but the hormone meant to be receding is still lingering near the surface. The clock has simply been told the wrong time. Softer, dimmer light in the last hours lets it red the darkness truly, and the descent quietly resume. Late stress can hold cortisol up in much the same way. A worried mind, a demand answered close to bedtime, or hours that shift and scatter from one night to the next can all keep the hormone raised when it is meant to be sinking. The clock loves regularity. It settles most easily into a rhythm it already knows. When nights arrive at steady hours, in gentle darkness, the descent comes without resistance. Tonight, you have given it that steadiness simply by being here, unhurried. The path down is open. Cortisol is free to follow its clock toward the low, quiet hollow where the deepest sleep is waiting. On most nights, the tide slips downward without any help from you. Yet there are nights when it doesn't fully ebb. A long stretch of stress, or a mind kept bright and busy late, can leave a little more of this hormone lingering than the hour would usually hold. The body reads those late signals as a reason to stay lightly ready, and so it keeps a thin thread of alertness woven through the dark. Sleep still comes, only it rests nearer the surface, easier to stir from, quicker to lift. Nothing is broken in this. It is simply the tide, meeting a night that asked it to linger. Think of the difference between a room dimming at dusk and one where a lamp stays on. Bright screens, tense conversation, or work that runs close to bedtime act a little like that lamp, a gentle signal that the day is not quite finished. In answer, the evening release of cortisol softens more slowly than it might. This is the body being faithful, not faulty. It is simply following the cues it is given. When the cues turn quiet, dimmer light, slower breath, a settling room, the tide reads them too, and remembers how to fall. It has been falling on its own for a very long time. The tide and your sleep speak to each other, night after night. A shorter or more broken night can nudge the next day's rhythm just slightly. The morning rise arriving a touch lower. The evening fall a touch less deep. It is a small shift, the kind the body makes constantly as it adjusts to the days it is handed. You may feel it as a morning that takes longer to gather, or an evening that stays a little more awake than you'd like. None of this locks in place. Each new day offers the rhythm a fresh chance to find its usual line again. And the loop turns the other way too. A flatter rhythm can make the next night's sleep arrive a little less easily, each side gently leaning on the other. Heard one way, that could sound like a trap. Yet the same loop is what lets things mend. A few steadier days, and the rhythm eases back toward its shape, carrying sleep along with it. Perhaps what we've been following was never a tide to be forced down, but a rhythm to be trusted. The question softens from how to make it fall, into what happens when you stop holding it up. Cortisol has a daytime job that reaches into the evening too. It helps free sugar into the blood, so your muscles and mind have fuel ready. That is part of why the morning peak meets you with energy. When stress lifts cortisol late in the day, the body prepares fuel it may not need. And sometimes that shows up as a quiet pull toward a snack, often something sweet. It isn't a failing of willpower, it's an old signal, doing what it was built to do. Knowing where the pull comes from can make it easier to meet gently, without any argument with yourself. This rhythm has a longer story than a single night. Across a lifetime, it tends to soften. In many people, the curve grows a little flatter with age. The morning peak, not quite as tall. The midnight trough, not quite as deep. Long seasons of stress can smooth it in a similar way. This isn't the rhythm wearing out, it's the rhythm adapting, as bodies do across decades. The tide still turns each day, only with a gentler hand. And much of its shape stays responsive to how we live, which is a quiet kind of good news, and something we'll return to soon. Not everyone's tide is timed the same. Those who wake early and feel brightest in the morning, often called larks, tend to have a cortisol peak that arrives a little sooner after waking. Night owls, more alive in the evening, ride a curve that's nudged slightly later. Neither is the right one nor the wrong one. They are the same daily tide, set to different clocks. Much of this leaning is written into us, shaped by genes and long habit. Knowing your own timing can be a gentle permission to stop measuring your rhythm against someone else's, and simply let yours be what it is. Here is the reassuring part, held quietly under all of this. The rhythm is remarkably resilient. It wants to find its shape, and a few steady signals are usually enough to help it. Morning light meeting the eyes soon after waking, some gentle movement across the day, and evenings that slope toward calm. These are the cues the tide reads most clearly. The ordinary textures of a life that let the curve keep its rise and its fall. Nothing here has to be arranged perfectly. The body is not waiting to be corrected. It is waiting. Patiently. And it rights itself, given even the smallest of chances. And so none of this is a test you could fail. The tide has been rising and falling within you since long before you thought about it. And it will keep doing so whether or not any night goes to plan. A restless night is not a mark against you. It is one turn of a rhythm that has thousands more ahead. If tonight feels lighter than you hoped, the curve simply carries the loss forward and tries again tomorrow. There is nothing here to earn and nothing to prove. Only a slow tide, moving through you, asking for no effort at all. Notice, if it's there, the faint readiness we've been describing, that thin thread of staying alert the busy hours can leave behind. You might feel it as a low hum in the chest, or a jaw that hasn't quite let go. You don't have to push it away. Let your next breath arrive a little slower than the last, and let the out-breath run longer, the way the evening tide takes its time. Feel the weight of your body handed fully to whatever holds it. Nothing here needs solving tonight. And as that thread loosens, the deeper turning of this rhythm is just ahead. Let's gather what these implications have shown. When the evening fall is honored, sleep settles deep when life keeps the tide high. Sleep floats nearer the surface, and either way, the rhythm stays ready to mend. It flattens across the years and leans early or late from one person to the next, yet it remains, faithfully turning. All of this has been circling a single quiet truth about where the tide is carrying you tonight, down toward its lowest, stillest point, in the deep middle of the night. That is where we turn next, into the trough itself. Across a single day, your cortisol traces one long, unhurried wave. It lifts in the dark, hours before you wake, cresting a little after your eyes open, so that you meet the morning already gathered and ready. Then, hour by hour, it eases downward, a slow, deliberate descent that runs beneath everything you do. By evening, it has fallen far from its peak, quiet and low, making room for sleep. Nothing about this is accidental. The rise and the fall are two halves of the same elegant design, tuned over a lifetime to the turning of your day. Consider the morning rise on its own. In the last stretch of sleep, before any alarm, your adrenal glands begin releasing cortisol in a gentle surge. Blood sugar lifts. Your heart finds its daytime rhythm, and the fog of sleep starts to clear, all before you have decided to do anything. This is not stress in the way the word usually feels. It is preparation, a kind of inner sunrise that lets you rise and meet the world. The same hormone that can leave you wired at night is, in the morning, simply the hand that helps you begin. The evening half of the wave is just as purposeful. As the day lengthens, the signal to your adrenal glands softens, and cortisol drifts lower with each passing hour. By the time the sky darkens, the hormone that carried you through the day is stepping back, loosening its hold. This falling is what releases you toward rest. It is not something breaking down or going wrong. It is the natural closing of a cycle that opened at dawn. The tide that rose to lift you into the day is now, just as faithfully, drawing back to let you down into night. Follow the fall far enough, and it reaches its lowest point, the trough, usually in the deep middle of the night, a few hours after you drift off. Here, your cortisol sits at its quietest of the entire 24 hours. The body that was braced and busy at midday has, by now, set almost all of that aside. This low is where your deepest, most restorative sleep tends to settle. Then, slowly and without hurry, the hormone begins to climb again through the small hours, so that by the time morning nears, it is already rising to meet you. None of this is left to chance or mood. Deep in your brain sits a tiny cluster of cells, the master clock, keeping time for your whole body. It reads the light of day and the dark of night, and from that it decides when cortisol should rise and when it should fall. Your adrenal glands are simply following its lead. This is why the wave arrives on schedule, even when your thoughts do not. The timing lives in your biology, older and steadier than any single restless evening. The clock is keeping the appointment, whether or not you feel ready. Because that clock listens to light. The evening's dimming is part of the story. As brightness fades from the rooms around you, the clock reads the coming night and lets the falling of cortisol continue undisturbed. Softer, warmer light in the hours before bed does not force anything. It simply agrees with what the body is already doing. A hormone is not switched off by a lamp turned low. The natural descent is only left to go on without interruption. The darkness your biology has been waiting for arriving, so the wave can keep sliding gently toward its low. There is a reason a little space before sleep feels so kind. When the demands of the day run right up against the pillow, the mind keeps calling for cortisol to stay ready. A buffer, even a slow, unremarkable half hour, lets that call quiet down. Nothing sudden has to happen in that gap. The body is simply no longer asked to perform, so the falling wave is not interrupted by one more thing to solve. The evening's descent was always going to happen. The buffer simply removes the reasons that would keep it from happening. Warmth, too, works quietly with the wave. When the skin is warmed, a bath, a heated room, blankets, blood moves toward the surface. And afterward, the body's core temperature drifts down. That falling inner temperature is one of the body's own signals for sleep, and it travels alongside the falling cortisol like two currents moving the same direction. Nothing is being overridden. The descent is simply given a little company. The warmth loosens the day from the muscles. The temperature settles, and the hormone that kept the body upright all day is left free to keep sinking toward its low. Slow breathing has a gentle say in this as well. When the outbreath lengthens and the pace softens. A long nerve running from brain to body carries a message of safety inward. The branch of the nervous system built for rest takes a little more of the lead, and the call for cortisol quiets by a degree. There is no call to breathe perfectly, or count, or try. When each exhale is simply left to grow unhurried, that alone tells the body that nothing needs guarding right now, and the falling hormone is left to fall, undisturbed by any alarm. The shape of the evening's fall is set, in part, by the morning. When bright light reaches the eyes early in the day, it presses the peak of cortisol up cleanly and marks the start of the daily wave with a firm edge. A curve that begins clearly tends to fall more clearly too. So the light met at dawn is quietly making tonight's descent smoother. None of this is being done now. In the dark, it is already done. The morning already lived has helped shape the softness with which this hormone is lowering the body at this moment. Movement through the day plays a similar part. When the body is active in daylight hours, the daily wave tends to hold its healthy shape. A clear rise, a steady fall, rather than flattening into something vague. Physical effort earlier on lets the evening's low arrive more completely. This does not mean anything is required of you tonight. It means the walking, the reaching, the ordinary motion already behind you has helped carve the curve that is now carrying you downward. The day's activity and the night's stillness are simply two ends of one well-drawn line. Here is something worth resting on. You cannot lower cortisol by deciding to, the way you might lower your voice. There is no muscle to relax that releases it, no thought firm enough to command it down. And yet it falls, reliably, every evening, without your instruction. This can come as a quiet relief. The winding down was never a task waiting on your effort or your willpower. The clock in your brain has been lowering this hormone since the afternoon, and it asks nothing of you but to let it. The descent does not have to be performed. If there is anything to do, it is smaller and softer than trying. Cortisol lingers when something keeps calling for it. A bright screen, an unfinished worry, a body still braced for the next demand. These are not failures, they are simply the fuel that keeps the wave from falling. So the work, if you can call it that, is not to push the hormone down, but to stop feeding it. Set down the reasons to stay ready, on by un, and the falling that was already underway is left free to continue on its own quiet schedule. As cortisol falls, it does not fall alone. In the same darkening hours, another messenger begins to rise. Melatonin, the hormone of night, is released as light fades, drifting upward just as cortisol drifts down. The two move like the ends of a slow seesaw, one stepping back as the other steps forward. This crossing is part of how your body knows it is night. You do not have to arrange the exchange or notice it happening. As the day's hormone recedes, the night's hormone is already coming to meet you, keeping the balance while you simply lie still. Alongside those two, your temperature is quietly joining in. In the evening, your core begins to cool, reaching its own low in the deep of the night, close to when cortisol reaches its trough. The falling warmth and the falling hormone are not competing, they are moving together. Two threads of the same descent into sleep. Your body is coordinating far more than you could hold in mind at once. While you rest, the temperature settles, the hormone lowers, and the night deepens. Each change small on its own, yet woven into a single, unhurried lowering of the whole. There is also a shift in who holds the reins. Through the busy day, the branch of your nervous system built for action tends to lead. As night comes, the other branch, the one built for rest and repair, takes over more of the work. Heart rate eases, digestion steers, the body turns inward to mend. This branch and the falling cortisol belong to the same movement toward rest. As the hormone lowers, the calmer system rises, and the two together carry you from the posture of doing into the posture of simply being held by the night. Seen together, the evening is less a shutting down than a handoff. Cortisol steps back, melatonin steps forward. Warmth drains from the core. The restful branch of the nervous system takes the lead. No single part is in charge, and none of it waits on you. Each thread passes its work to the next in a sequence your body has run every night of your life. You are not the manager of this exchange. You are the one it is being done for, the guest for whom the whole quiet handover is arranged, night after night, without a word from you. That handover clears the way for something specific. When cortisol reaches its low and the calmer systems have taken over, your deepest sleep tends to arrive. The slow, heavy kind, where the body does its most thorough repair. The trough is not empty. It is the very condition that lets restoration happen. So the falling you have been following all evening is not a loss of anything. It is the making of room. The lower the hormone drifts, the more fully, that deep, mending sleep can settle in and do its unhurried, invisible work while you lie completely at rest. It can help to know that the fall is the default, not the exception. Left undisturbed, cortisol lowers on its own every single evening. The descent is what your body does when nothing gets in the way. A restless night is usually not the wave refusing to fall. It is something quietly holding it up, which means you are not trying to create the descent from nothing. It is already leaning downward, already inclined toward its low. Your part is only to stop propping it up and let the natural pull of the night finish what it has begun. Step back far enough and a single direction appears. The hormone is falling. The temperature is falling. The night's messenger is rising. The restful nerves are rising. And the deep clock beneath them all is turning the whole arrangement towards sleep. Every current is moving the same way, and every one of them is moving without your effort. You are not swimming against this. You are being carried by it, held inside a slow, coordinated drift toward rest that would continue even if you forgot it was happening. There is nowhere for you to steer. The direction is already set. Somewhere in all of this lives a small permission. If the winding down does not depend on your effort, then you are allowed to stop being on. You do not have to stay ready, monitor the night, or manage your own rest into being. The systems designed for exactly this are already at work, and they do not need you awake to supervise them. Whatever part of you has stayed braced through the day can, right now, be spared the job. The night has it. You are permitted to let go of the watch and simply be lowered into sleep. So gather what the night has been showing, thread by thread. Cortisol rose at dawn to meet the world and has been falling since, on a schedule kept by a clock older than any worry. It reaches its low in the deep of night, hands off to warmth and melatonin and the restful nerves, and clears the way for the deepest sleep. Through all of it, nothing has asked for your willpower. The wave was never yours to switch off. It was only ever yours to stop resisting. And that is where the whole night has been quietly leading. Here, then, is what the evening has been saying all along. The winding down of your stress hormone is not something you perform. It is a tide. 1. Your body turns on its own, faithfully, whether or not you feel you have earned the rest. The rise at morning and the fall at night are two motions of a single, self-turning cycle that was moving long before you thought about it tonight and will keep moving long after. You are not the one who lowers the tide. You are the shore it returns to, evening after evening, without ever being asked. And if the tide turns on its own, then rest is not a thing you achieve. It begins in the moment you stop resisting a descent that is already underway. The hormone was always going to fall. The night was always going to deepen. All the effort of trying to relax was, in a way, the one thing holding the surface tense. Let that effort go, and nothing is lost. The falling simply continues, unopposed, the way water finds its level once you take your hand away. What remains for you is not to make rest happen, but to allow it. This is the quiet truth beneath the whole night. Your body lowers its own stress hormone toward a midnight low and lifts it again toward a morning peak, turning that tide entirely on its own. Nothing about your rest waits on your willpower, your worry, or your watching. The wave falls because it is built to fall, and it will carry you down whether you grip or release. To rest is simply to stop fighting a current already moving toward stillness. You do not have to wind yourself down. You only have to let the tide that is turning, turn. Notice how little is being asked of you right now. The hormone that kept you upright all day is lowering without a single instruction, the way a tide slips back from the shore without being called. That turning is happening inside you at this very moment. You do not have to begin it. Only stop holding it still. Let the last of the day's readiness loosen and drain away. There is nothing here to manage. No watch left to keep. The current is already moving towards stillness, and it is carrying you with it. Let it take the weight you are holding. Somewhere in the last hour, the tide began to turn. The stress hormone that rose to meet your morning has been quietly slipping lower, the way water pulls back from the sand without anyone calling it home. You did not have to notice for it to happen. The falling is built into you, patient and slow, a going out that asks nothing of the shore it leaves behind. Deep in the brain sits a small clock, no larger than a grain of rice. And tonight it is doing what it has always done, turning the stress signal down, degree by quiet degree. It does not wait for your permission. It does not check whether the day was finished. As darkness gathers, it simply lowers the dial, the way a hand might dim a lamp in a room where someone has finally lain down to rest. All day you were on, ready, leaning slightly forward into whatever might come. That readiness had a name and a chemistry, and it served you well. But the night does not ask you to stay braced. The hormone of alertness is thinning now, and with it, the quiet instruction to keep watch. You can set the readiness down. Nothing is coming that the falling tide has not already prepared you to meet by simply letting go. Every night of your life, without your involvement, this same descent has happened. The stress hormone has climbed and crested and fallen again, faithful as the moon pulling water. You slept through most of it, never once managing the machinery. Tonight is no different. You can trust the fall the way you trust the ground to hold, not by gripping it, but by letting your weight rest fully into what was always going to carry you. An alarm only stays loud while something keeps feeding it. When the feeding stops, the sound has nowhere to go but softer. The thoughts that kept your stress hormone lifted all day, the lists, the worries, the rehearsals, they can rest now too. As you stop handing them to the night, the signal has nothing left to answer. And into that unfed, quiet, something gentle begins to settle, the way dust settles in a still room. As the hours drift toward midnight, your stress hormone is finding its lowest place. This is the floor of the daily curve, the deepest hollow in the tide, the hour your body has been moving toward since the light first faded. There is nothing to do here but arrive. The lowest point is not an emptiness to fear. It is the quiet basin where rest pools, where the body finally stops spending and begins, at last, to gather itself back. Somewhere in your shoulders, a holding you forgot you were doing is beginning to loosen. High stress hormone keeps muscles faintly braced, ready without reason. As the level falls, the readiness has less to hold. The jaw softens. The hands uncurl. The long, thin line of tension down the back releases one notch, then another. You are not doing this. You are only allowing what the lowering chemistry has already made possible in the quiet of your body. Imagine the day as water you carried in cupped hands, spilling and refilling all the long hours. Now the tide is going out, and it is taking that water with it. The stress hormone that held the day's weight is draining toward its midnight low. You do not have to pour anything out yourself. The going out does it for you, drawing the heaviness down and away, leaving your open hands finally, gently, empty and light. For one night, you are allowed to not be the one holding everything in place. The body has a system for this, older than any worry you could name. It lowers the alarm chemistry on its own schedule, whether or not you are watching. So you can stop standing guard. You can let the falling hormone stand watch instead, faithful and unhurried, keeping its quiet vigil so that you, at last, do not have to. The darkness around you is not empty. It is information. As light leaves your eyes, a message travels inward, telling the small clock that the descent may deepen. Every shade of dimming lowers the stress signal a little further. So the dark is on your side tonight. It is not something to push through until morning. It is the very thing loosening the hormone's grip, carrying you down the long slope toward the trough of the night. This rhythm is older than your name, older than your worries, older than the language you use to describe a hard day. Long before you learned to hold the world together, your body already knew how to let it fall. The rise and fall of the stress hormone was rehearsed in you before your first breath. Tonight it plays again, the oldest lullaby, needing no words and no effort, only a body willing to be carried. The alarm inside you was built for moments, not for nights. It was meant to rise, do its brief work, and fall away again. Keeping it lifted through the dark was never the design. So if it stayed high longer than it should have today, the night is here to correct that gently. The falling curve is the body's way of returning the alarm to where it belongs. Silent, low, resting until it is truly needed again. Watch, in your mind, a shoreline at low tide. The water has pulled far back, and what remains is smooth, vidt sant, still and shining under a low sky. That is your body now, the stress hormone drawn down to its faintest trace. Nothing crashes here. Nothing demands. There is only the quiet expanse the tide leaves behind when it stops reaching, when it finally rests in its lowest place and lets the shore go silent. All day, you were the one giving, answering, carrying. The night reverses this. It does not ask you to give anything more. As the stress hormone falls, your body shifts from spending to receiving, taking in the stillness, drawing down the dark, gathering rest the way dry ground drinks a slow rain. You can be received tonight. You can let the falling tide hold you the way you have held so much, for so long, without being held. When the alarm chemistry is low, there is nothing left to defend against. The body understands, in its oldest wisdom, that the dark hours are for repair, not for guarding, so the walls can come down. The watchfulness can dissolve. What rises in its place is not danger, but ease. The deep permission of a system that has lowered its own alarm and found, on the other side of the falling, only the wide and simple quiet of night. Notice how the fall asks nothing of you. You do not have to breathe a certain way to make it happen. You do not have to empty your mind or arrange your thoughts. The stress hormone descends on a schedule written far below your effort, in a place your worrying cannot reach. This is the mercy of it. The most gentle lowering of the night happens whether or not you manage it. You are free to simply let go. Water does not decide to flow downhill. It simply follows the shape it is given, moving toward the lowest place without struggle. Tonight, your stress hormone is water, following the curve of the night toward its midnight floor. You are being carried the same way, not by will, but by shape, by a rhythm that bends everything gently downward. There is no swimming to do. There is only the letting, the following, the being carried down. The day is allowed to end, not to be finished, not to be solved, but simply to end, the way light ends without asking permission from the things it leaves in shadow. Your stress hormone knows this. It does not wait for completion before it falls. It lowers over the unfinished and the unresolved alike, treating them all the same, laying the whole imperfect day down into the dark and letting the tide take it out. There is a particular safety in the low place, the trough where the stress hormone rests near midnight. It is the quietest chemistry your body knows, the furthest from alarm you travel in a day. Here, nothing is being sounded. Nothing is being called. You have arrived at the still center of the daily wave, the calm hollow the tide makes when it has gone as far out as it goes. Rest here. You are meant to. Feel how the loosening spreads. It began, perhaps, in the shoulders, and now it moves down the arms, through the chest, into the long muscles of the legs. As the alarm chemistry thins, the body has less reason to hold any part of itself tight. The loosening is not something you perform. It is something you permit, a slow unclenching that follows the falling hormone, the way shadow follows the setting of the sun, without hurry and without end. From the moment you woke this morning, you were already on your way here. The stress hormone that peaked shortly after waking has been descending ever since. All the long day, a slow curve bending toward this hour. Every step, even the hard ones, carried you closer to the fall. So nothing was wasted. The whole day was the tide going out, and you have arrived, at last, at the low and quiet water where it was always leading. You do not have to watch the tide to trust that it turns. You do not have to feel the hormone fall to know that it is falling. The body keeps its promises in the dark, unobserved, faithful whether or not you are awake to witness it. So you can close the watching now. You can let the falling happen behind your closed eyes, unseen and certain, the way the deepest and truest things have always happened, quietly, on their own. Listen to how quiet it has become. Somewhere in the last hour, without a moment you could point to, the alarm went soft. The thoughts that raced have slowed to a drift. The stress hormone has slipped low, and the quiet it left behind has already filled the room around you. You do not have to reach for calm anymore. It is here. It arrived while you were letting go. The way sleep arrives. Not summoned. Only allowed. This is the last of the tide going out. The water has pulled back nearly as far as it can. The stress hormone settling toward its lowest hollow of the night. Everything you carried up the shore this morning has been drawn gently down and away. What remains is smooth and still and yours. A body at its calmest. A mind at its softest. A shoreline the tide has finally, completely, released into the long dark quiet of rest. You were never meant to hold the day all through the night. It was never yours to carry that far. The tide is going out now, the way it always has, the way it always will, and it is reaching for the weight in your hands. You can let it take that weight. You can open your fingers and let the whole long day slip out with the water, and trust that the morning will bring back only what you need. 100 facts ago, you arrived wired and tense, the day still humming in your chest. Now the humming has thinned to almost nothing. We followed the stress hormone down the long slope of the evening, all the way to its midnight trough, the lowest, quietest hollow the tide makes in a day. And we traced its other end too. The cortisol awakening surge, the way it climbs to peak shortly after you wake. What began as a hormone that held you braced became a rhythm that knows, entirely on its own, exactly when to let you fall. Your stress hormone was never something you had to manage. It falls to its lowest near midnight and rises to meet your morning. A rhythm drawn without you, one that has always known when to let the weight go. When the alarm of the day loosened its hold and let you fall, this quiet may have had a hand in it. A soft like, a gentle subscribe, gourmand, or a share carries this same falling tide to another wired and weary mind still waiting to come down. One quiet tap, one sleepy soul at a time. Right now, near the midnight floor, your stress hormone is resting at its lowest, the tide drawn as far out as it goes. You did not send it there. It went on its own, the way water finds the lowest place. Feel the last of the bracing leave your body. The shoulders, the jaw, the hands, unclenching, by with nothing left to hold. Let your whole self dissolve into that outgoing tide. The falling was always going to happen. It was always going to carry the weight down and lift again, gently, to meet your morning. You can let these thoughts go out with the tide now, like the last of the water slipping from the shore, leaving the sand smooth and still. Let your body grow heavy where it rests. If sleep comes, let it carry you down to the low and quiet floor of the night, where the falling is already complete. The Relaxing Body Science Facts to Fall Asleep To playlist has spent many hours here, in the body's quiet machinery. The next hour follows a question this one didn't finish. What else does the body lower in the dark, faithfully, while you sleep? That hour is waiting whenever you are ready. But if your eyes are closed, stay there. Rest well, weary one. The tide was always going to take the weight. You never had to hold it all night. Where science becomes the softest place to rest. Good night.